weight of smoke and statues. The ruins of Sanctum Medicae Trinova still smoldered. Flames flickered low across its shattered foundations, casting jagged light on skeletal towers and burned spires now bowed inward like praying hands. The river churned black with ash and bone, reflecting the smog as metal beams collapsed into the current with dull, echoing groans. From the estuary, a wind rose, sharp with salt, the tide returning. It swept through the gutted manufactorums and over the scorched bridges, carrying the scent of war's aftermath. Archmagos Sensarax Centauri stood unmoving on a temporary command platform atop the embankment. Her crimson robes were immaculate, gold-trimmed and untouched by soot, but her augmetic fingers twitched in restrained fury. Her eyes, glassy emerald lenses, scanned the wreckage like searchlights, reading trauma in thermal and structural overlays. Beside her, Magos Logi Serena spoke in crisp binaric cant, each syllable a cold inventory of catastrophe. Security casualties, 120 palace guards, 605 naval personnel, confirmed loss of the cruiser Devotion. Centauri twitched a finger, a gesture somewhere between dismissal and annoyance. Serena continued flatly. Watling Street Manufactorum, 100% destruction. Barclays Square Manufactorum, partial ruin. Combined losses include 15 adepts, 597 certified workers, 13,356 indentured, 5,003 servitors destroyed. Tram bridge over the Holborn collapsed. She paused. The numbers are within acceptable tolerances. Centauri's gaze snapped to her like a servo joint locking. We will be lucky to salvage even half of the macro cannon works. Do you know how much this will cost? We have tithes to pay. We are in arrears as it is. Her voice sharpened, clipped, and venom-laced. This is intolerable. Around them, a loose circle of Mechanicus subordinates and officers lingered in awkward silence, just close enough to sync data from the Archmagos interface, just far enough to avoid the line of fire. A little farther back, Sergeant Winthrop stood with a towel pressed to his face, wiping away soot and dried blood. His coat was torn, buttons missing, and his voice hoarse from shouting over battle and flame. He looked up toward Centauri. You didn't count the sanctioned ancillary workers, he said quietly, or the Arbites constables. He added after a pause, voice dry, or the cost of a perfectly good river patrol boat. Logi Serena turned her head slowly, one lens blinking. Arbites personnel are tithed from Imperial, not Forge World rolls. Winthrop snorted and brushed a smear of ash from his coat. And how much does a marshal cost in your tithes? Centauri turned slowly and raised her staff in a silencing gesture. Marshal Voss saved this city. Ensure his family receives proper dispensation. She paused a moment for calculation. 20% bonus on a quarter-year wage. Winthrop gave her a long look. And a statue to commemorate my constables? He asked, his tone not entirely serious. Centauri rolled her eyes, but caught the bark of laughter from Serena behind her. That shifted the balance. She turned, addressing Winthrop directly. Heroes should be remembered. It bolsters morale and encourages optimal production rates among the workforce. Her tone gained a subtle edge as she glanced sidelong at Serena. And I believe it appropriate that the Ministry of Applied Logic make a discretionary donation to fund the memorial. Serena's eyes rotated in their brass sockets in visible disbelief, but she caught the look on the Archmagos' face. She offered Winthrop a smile so sweet it could have soured paint. Of course, it would be our honor to fund a memorial to the brave defenders of the city. Most gracious, Winthrop said with mock dignity, bowing ever so slightly. He pulled out his flask, downed the last of it, and added, May it be made from the melted scrap of one of your broken servitors. Serena twitched, but said nothing. Magos Logi Serena gave a groveling bow to the Archmagos and made her exit, her personal retinue of servitors and junior adepts shuffling after her in discordant binaric whispers. Arguments were already breaking out behind her, quiet, clipped, and deeply political. Centauri ignored them, her gaze locked on the still smoking ruins of the Sanctum Medicae across the river. I suppose I should thank you too, she asked dryly, without turning. She gestured lazily toward the wreckage. There is saving, and then there is destroying Forge property. I hear one of the city's cruisers was blown up deliberately. I should have this Dornstall brought up on charges. Winthrop opened his mouth in disbelief, but hesitated, glancing toward the retreating form of the disgraced Logi. He was beginning to understand the way tides shifted in hive politics. It was, in its own way, not so different from precinct turf wars. He cleared his throat. A trial would bring attention to what happened here. Centauri froze. Trial? She echoed. Attention? Her eyes blinked. 1, 2, 3 mechanical shutters flicking in succession. The fourth twitched. Then she exhaled sharply and shook her head. Can't you just have him shot or something? Nearby staff flinched. A few pretended to adjust data slates. Others studied their boots with deep interest. Winthrop smiled. It wasn't warm. We could avoid an investigation altogether. Dornstall and his companions should be commended. Centauri's augmetics flickered slightly, as if her logic core was struggling with his sentence. Winthrop pressed on, voice calm and knowing. I've heard the Arbites precinct on Sarathar is short on seasoned officers since their last purge. A terrible place. Hot, dusty, filled with rebels. Seems like the perfect place for someone like Dornstall to prove his worth. Centauri considered. Sarathar, yes, that sand-choked hellhole on the other side of the reach. She smiled at last, a cold, satisfied smile. Very well. She turned to the crowd and raised her voice. Constable Dornstall will be commended for his actions. She nodded sharply, then added for effect. Today will be a citywide day of celebration. A parade will be held. 10% increase to ration vouchers. At this, the previously bored representatives of the ecclesiarchy perked up. A deacon clapped loudly, nudging his peers into a chorus of hymn fragments, and shouted praise. Centauri shot them a glare, and they quickly returned to quiet prayer. But a few remained smiling. It will be called, she paused, calculating, Henrik Voste. There were a few more claps, which faltered once the priests realized there would be no saint declared. She waved her aides away, then turned to Winthrop, her expression appraising. You're finding your feet, Sergeant Winthrop. He blinked. I aim to do my service to the city, my lady. Centauri grunted. She turned to look out across the smoldering skyline, her eyes narrowed. A penny for your thoughts. Winthrop placed his cap back on with practiced care. If the constabulary can help, my lady, we will. She dismissed the last of her staff with a gesture, waiting until they had gone. Then, with her back still to the ruins, she spoke softly, a rare moment of guarded uncertainty. What do we do with the survivors, the ones exposed to the Trinova malady? Winthrop frowned, flipping through casualty tallies and quarantine logs in his data slate. The options were grim. 3,000 exposed, not confirmed infected, but exposed. Quarantine would be impossible. Execution, too public. And with the Hospitallers dead, there was no one to take the blame. He closed the slate, looked up slowly. Since the grand theft of Vault 7's STC cache, that vault's been empty, hasn't it? Centauri's augmetic eye flickered. She said nothing, but her posture sharpened. The vault is intact, fully sealed, has stasis fields. You could fit all 3,000 inside. Keep them in null state until a cure is found or until... He let the words hang. Centauri smiled. The vault, a sealed, forgotten tomb beneath the city, out of sight, out of mind. No cost, no trial, no public unrest, just emptiness and silence. Then I shall require a marshal to organize it, she said, tone light and chilling. I am but a civilian, after all. Winthrop hesitated. I'd be honored, Lady Centauri. She gave a sharp nod. Then I leave the paperwork to you, Marshal of Trinova. The new marshal watched her go, hands behind his back, jaw set. Only once she was out of earshot did he exhale. Then he turned, scanning the battered ranks of constables. Day watch, night watch, river patrol, uniforms scorched, armor cracked, but heads held high. They were all veterans now. You heard her, Winthrop said, voice steady. Prepare the vault. A few constables exchanged looks. Then they moved. Just another day in the Adeptus Arbites. Winthrop turned toward the road, shoulders rolling, coat flapping behind him. Ahead, the shattered outline of the Fleet Bridge precinct stood black against the dawn. His desk would still be there. So would the paperwork. Not his job anymore. Reginald, he called. A figure stepped forward. Sergeant, Marshal. Winthrop smiled thinly. I want that watch house spotless by tomorrow morning, and all paperwork on the governor's desk by nightfall. Sergeant Reginald Cowley. Reginald blinked. Then the promotion clicked. Yes, Marshal, he said, saluting sharply. Winthrop stepped closer and leaned in, voice a theatrical whisper. And keep an eye on Constable Briggs. Rumor is he's got a rifle stashed in his locker behind his coat. The other constables burst into laughter. This part of the job, at least, never changed. Hjörulf stepped carefully over the cracked rubble of the manufactorum. His stormy blue armor gleamed dully against soot-blackened walls, streaked with ash and battle grime. "So," he said, "you never found your man?" Braylon gave a slight shake of her head, gazing out a shattered window toward the river. "No, but I'm sure he's still alive." Calculus Logifexian, walking with both legs restored and 2 additional mechadendrites rising from his upper chassis, scanned the structure methodically. His voice crackled down from a higher ledge. "The probability of Astalon surviving the river, the Trinova malady, and the search call is statistically insignificant." Braylon looked up at him without blinking. "He's a hunter, I'm sure of it," Fexian whistled. "So were 100 unarmed victims in Stage 2 infection. That's hardly a glowing endorsement." Hjörulf rested a hand on his power sword and looked out over the water, where the incoming tide was slowly submerging the burnt-out hull of the Devotion. "I'm inclined to agree with the Logi," he said, turning back to Braylon. "But the Sothawirtas will have his data. If he gets off-world, they'll find him." Braylon smiled slightly at that. "I'm grateful," she said. The Sothawirtas, NihtWyrtha's intelligence branch, had agents embedded across the Arcana Inclusium and were spreading steadily into the Reach. If anyone could find a ghost like Astalon, it was them. She nodded toward Hjörulf's armor. "I like the uniform, Wigathan blue, ocean colors, Wolfgar's choice." Hjörulf shrugged. "Cheapest paint," Braylon laughed. "And the skull?" She gestured to his pauldron, the heraldry of the Void Revenants, a bone-white skull set in ghostly green flame, shaped from ghost-forged crystal. "Revenant. Skull. It fits," Hjörulf said. "Besides, when Wolfgar first arrived, we thought he was a god walking out of the mist with that skull mask. Figured it was only fitting we carry it into Imperial service." Braylon raised an eyebrow. "Dornstall said he thought you were chaos when you landed." They cleared the doorway into daylight. Tunbald stood there, resting against a broken buttress, his bolter's barrel shaped like a snarling warg's head. Without turning, he called back, told Osric. He wouldn't listen, said people would think we were traitors. Cuthhelm, leaning on his force stave, which hovered miraculously in place thanks to integrated grav fields, snorted. "I said so too, but no one listens to me." Braylon glanced between them all. "So, you're the first of the Void Revenants. Where are the rest of you?" Another Astartes stepped out from behind Fexian, offering the Logi a power-clawed gauntlet to help him down the ledge. His helmet was still on, but the voice and gait marked him unmistakably. Osric, no longer clad in Iron Hand's black, but in the new storm blue livery of his chapter. "They are it," he said. "Out of 300 gene supplicants, they're the only ones who made it to full Astartes." Fexian blinked. "Statistically, catastrophic. 2% success rate is low, but 1%? Hjörulf nudged Tunbald and pointed to a twitching infected body floating against the opposite bank. A long black claw protruded from its spine. A shot rang out. The body stopped moving. Hjörulf turned to Braylon. "Are you sure you won't come with us? Maresip is undergoing shakedown after the Incoloris incident. We'll be back in port within the month." Braylon shook her head. "We'll take the Diligent Herald. She's spaceworthy again, as soon as the spine is lowered." Osric looked westward. From the cloud banks above, the long cables and ringed structures of the Void Elevator had begun to descend, the spine that connected Trinova to the orbital docks. It had been pulled up at the start of the outbreak. 2 standard hours, he said, then turned to Hjörulf, eyes hopeful. "I could drive her there? In the Land Raider?" Cuthhelm didn't look up. He just extended a palm. A small hololithic model of a Land Raider projected from it, crashed, nose first into a ditch with comic accuracy. "What did Skop Wolfgar say?" Osric sighed, head bowed in exaggerated defeat. His axe scraped the rubble as he said, "Out of all 9 revenants, Godric and Osric are not allowed to drive the Land Raider." He paused. "And Godric is a dreadnought." They all suppressed a laugh, barely. Even Cuthhelm had to turn slightly to hide the twitch at the corner of his mouth. Fexian said nothing, but the twitching rhythm of his mechadendrites betrayed amusement. Hjörulf paused, just for a moment. It was unusual enough that Braylon noticed, watching him closely. "So," he said at last, voice quieter, "you're still set on resigning your commission? Moving to Silthdale?" Braylon gave a tired, contented smile and scratched the scar on her cheek, the real one, not the ceramic half. "I am, once we return, but I'm not leaving service. Adric offered me command of the great Forge garrison." Heorwulf smiled, not the smirk of a war leader, but something gentler. "And with the new train line, Silthdale is what, an hour from the Forge? Feels like someone planned this." He glanced sideways at her. "If not the Hlafort of Silthdale, then perhaps his Modor." The others looked away, suddenly fascinated with the rubble or with inspecting non-existent damage to their weapons. That only made it worse. Braylon turned slightly, eyes dancing. "I've no idea what you're talking about," but she gave him a subtle wink, her one human blue eye catching the light just so. Hjorwulf didn't answer. He didn't need to. Homeward bound. Trinova shrank behind them, the sprawling hive city fading into haze as the transit tube whisked them through the tramway, bound for the spine dockyards. Calculus Logifexian stood in silence, watching the distant spires recede. He had enjoyed seeing his old haunts, but as the miles fell away, he concluded, memories belong to recollection, not return. The past was always softer in the mind than it ever was in the grim reality of the present. Before long, they would be back on NihtWyrtha. Not his birth world, but it felt like home. That suited him better. Beside him, Braylon sat quietly, her gaze fixed ahead as the starport loomed closer. Not home, exactly, but someone was waiting for her there. Her thoughts drifted to the bolt of blue silk tucked in her footlocker. Would she be moving out of the Skitarii barracks? Perhaps into a newly rebuilt hall in the tiny hamlet of Silthdale? The silk would make a fine wedding dress. She smiled at the thought. A life beyond war. Maybe. The transit car pulled into the station, doors hissing open. The dockyards were alive. Traders, rogue captains, squats in the colors of a dozen holds, mechanicus adepts, mercenaries, dockers, and voidsmen. The lifeblood of the Maelstrom Reach. What had once been a dream of connectivity was now a thundering, smoke-stained reality. A network built not by Imperium decree, but by the unlikely cooperation of Navis Astra Wigathane and NihtWyrthan techno-barbarians. Near the embarkation gates, Dornstall leaned on a railing, flask in hand. He gave a lazy nod as Braylon and Fection approached. "I hear you got promoted," Braylon said, smirking. "And reassigned to Sarathar?" "Yes and yes," Dornstall replied without ceremony. "I hear they use bikes there," she added, "a bit different from riverboats." He snorted and took a sip. Ahead, a massive starliner sat ready, its hull bearing the livery of the Imperial Inland Transit Authority. Two constables stood by the hatch, ceremonial weapons in hand. Dornstall turned as Winthrop approached, his new marshal's badge gleaming. He raised a brow. "Congratulations on the promotion," he said. Winthrop glanced down at the insignia, then shrugged and extended a hand. "The Emperor light your way." "And yours." Dornstall turned and stepped up to the transport. He paused in the hatchway, looked back once, then saluted and was gone. Winthrop tipped his hat to the others. "I hope we meet again, under better circumstances." Then he marched off into the crowd, his constables falling into step beside him, like a column of smoke melting into the machine of the hive. Braylon and Fection pressed on, weaving through the crowds. Merchants shouted prices, servitors rolled past with crates, and distant warning klaxons wailed as a bulk freighter detached from the rings. They passed stalls hawking spices, charms, knives, data slates, ration stimulants, and headed for the berth of the diligent herald. Fection boarded first. Braylon paused. She turned back, watching the long hall of the spine docks, the bustle and energy of Trinova's rebirth. She smiled, then stepped aboard. The hatch sealed behind her. A huddled figure in filthy rags exhaled from the shadows nearby. Relief passed over his face. For a moment, he had feared they'd noticed him. His eyes scanned the crowd, no more constables, just noise and movement. He moved, past the diligent herald, down 2 berths farther, toward a ship scrawled with faded Gothic letters. Perfuga. A battered barge with scarred armor and rusted engine vents. A rough-looking man stood by the boarding ramp, a dirty tunic, worn boots, and a thick scar across one cheek. The figure in rags approached. "I hear you're looking for recruits." The man sneered, taking in the stranger's grime and twitching posture. The figure extended a hand. Beneath the filth, a faint tattoo glinted, a mark of Slanesh nearly lost in the wrinkles and oil. The man's sneer shifted to a knowing smirk. "Welcome aboard, brother," he said. "I'm Dagvar. We've already got one of your kind. Calls himself Markham." Astalin smiled. He entered the ship without another word. The last of the crew finished loading supplies. Then the hatch sealed with a hiss. Out in orbit, the diligent Herald detached from its mooring. Its engines hummed, and it drifted past a heavy ore hauler, edging toward the warp translation point. Inside, Fexian sat at the command throne, plotting the route. At her station, Braylon idly flicked through her console, scrolling through dresses, patterns, stitches, fittings. Her fingers lingered on her abdomen, instinctively now, the pressure gentle. She had told no one, not yet, except the Hlaford of Silthdal. There would be time for that. Time and safety. Two things she'd never allowed herself to hope for before. She closed her eyes and smiled, just a flicker, then returned her attention to the warp-anchoring cogitator. Duty first. But something new stirred behind that thought. A crewman, a conscript working passage home, watched the city vanish from the viewport, then returned to his work, tightening the final bolt on a console junction. It felt good to finish a task. The next one awaited, a broken nutrient dispenser in the lower decks. His name was already logged on the repair slate. He was looking forward to fixing it. It would be his best repair yet. As he walked, he whistled a tune. With banners aloft and steel in her hand, outside the diligent Herald aligned with its translation point. Ghostlight flickered across its prow. Then it vanished into the warp, heading for home.